Hello and welcome, everyone. I'm your host, Rick Watson, and my co host is here with me.
Yes, Rick, I'm actually podcasting in real time from the beach, proving you can podcast from anywhere. That's why I got my beach hair, don't care.
I am jealous, first of all. Second is, did you happen to notice the new song we have going on?
I did, and it has given me so many good vibes. Why don't you tell our crew that we've really hit it big?
We have hit it big. We have an amazing friend of the show, good personal friends and business partners. Jackie, the one of the dynamic duo, make up the super group, we call them Ryle. They have created a new theme song for us, so we're excited to debut that today. It is actually going to be a big part of our dance party later on too.
It sure is. I've been working on some new moves for that, so I can't wait to break them out. Not just my normal chair moves.
Okay,
New stuff
yeah.
for it.
There's a lot of new stuff coming on with the Beach Care. We are sponsored by VTEX, just as a reminder. Also, a reminder, this is a live show. And so if you can tell us where you're viewing us from, what you would love to talk about today, we have a couple of interesting topics. First of all, we're going to talk about Peloton, and in particular, not only Peloton, because they just lost their CEO. We're going to talk about a contrast to Carvana. We're going to go into Shopify earnings and the latest. I don't know if you know, there was a Forrester report released in the last week, particularly the B2C report. We're going to break that down. So I'm excited to do that. It's going to be a packed show.
It is. It's so packed, actually. It's why we had to cut the headline hangover, because otherwise we're going to stretch beyond our 45 max limit. And I think we'd probably start to lose people. So we probably might as well just get into it, right?
Yeah. And so, like, while we started out, we can actually get into some interesting facts about today. First up, in 1983, again, we had the sort of montage a couple of weeks back when Nick Kaplan was here. Laverne and Shirley, the last episode of Laverne and Shirley was hosted in 1983.
Oh, such a good show.
Amazing
Women
show.
power, too.
Amazing
Bring it,
show.
Laverne and Shirley.
Woman power. So we're excited. Um, Edward Scott Finnegan asked about big commerce. Maybe we might get to that later. So we appreciate that. Second, 1994, Nelson Mandela ushered in as the first Black president of South Africa. Huge historic moment, obviously, for that country.
Yep, absolutely.
So we are excited come up Peloton. Kind of the subtext here says fast growth is not what it's cracked up to be. The company has gone through quite a number of changes over its history, from its humble beginnings in 2012 to the multiple CEOs that it's been through, multiple rounds of layoffs. Where do you want to start with this, Jess?
Well, first I have to, full disclosure, fan of Peloton. I really am. You and I both worked for John Foley. I actually have my shirt from the Kickstarter campaign. So a lot of affinity.
Same.
Thanks. I wear it all the time. It doesn't matter how many rides I've had, but ultimately, I still have that shirt. And I think that's really what is so much of this brand. There's a lot of heart and there's a lot of community, but community has not been able to sustain it. And ultimately, it comes down to what you wrote in your post on LinkedIn earlier this week. There has been this pandemic boom, right? We've had a behavior where gyms were probably the least safe place for people to go, as you said. We had this huge reaction, people buying tons of not only Pelotons, but other at-home exercise equipment. I mean, the sporting goods industry had a massive spike. You couldn't get any hand weights for a long time, right? So people went back to the good old push-up days. As manufacturing ramped up, they just really couldn't keep up with that whole supply chain situation. Is that like problem number one as you see it? Or
Yeah, that's a big problem. Obviously they had one of the big issues is they had their own manufacturing. And so that was the big issue. It was like you had this huge amount of demand, and there's sort of good news, bad news if you put the consumer number one. Good news is that you're going to take care of the consumer. Bad news is if you're ramping up company costs to take care of the consumer and the demand doesn't stay with you indefinitely and those costs do, then that's sort of where the first big problem comes in.
Right. Yeah, so what was their second biggest problem from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the second biggest problem seems to be just the lack of general cost control, period. And so the company was focused on building the brand, which developed an amazing cult following. The problem is, what's the next act? And that happens to a lot of companies where they find this. First of all, it's very hard to do. Like to find this like a super enthusiastic group of
Support,
followers and
support.
then from there, it's like, how do we go from there to the mainstream? Like, first of all, most people don't buy fitness equipment, which is kind of an issue. And second of all, even if they buy fitness equipment, everyone's memories of fitness equipment is like the treadmill that sits in your basic basement that what is it used for?
It hangs up my clothes.
Hangs up your clothes. Everyone gives the same exact answer to this question.
Yes.
So that's it. I mean, that's ultimately the challenge with fitness, period.
Yeah, yeah. The treadmill, the exercise, they become your, next air drying rack when your shower gets too crowded, and you can't air dry all you run out of room to air dry all your clothes. So, yes, I think that becomes the challenge. And then to your point, there's probably only so many people that can afford that type of equipment, right? Which
Right.
is where, you get into, all right, well, let's start doing some buy now, pay later plans. We're gonna partner with a firm. We're gonna
Right.
provide these, credit, extensions. It's not like the iPhone where everybody has to have it. So I'll shell out, a couple $1,000 or $1,000 for my
Right.
iPhone and I can pay over time. This kind of hits harder, hits faster. And not again, there's probably the market size and the serviceable addressable market of Peloton is likely small, right?
Right, it's definitely small. They also had that other issue, which is kind of like not one of their major issues, but it was a big blip on the radar. They had some of those like kids die like
Yeah.
under the new treadmill launch, which is like horrific. And the company did not respond well initially to that crisis. It was like, oh, there's nothing to see here. And then later on, they backtracked and were like, okay, well, we need to redesign the whole tread device.
And
Uh,
recall, which
yeah.
is adds more cost, adds more expense. So, I thought though the strategy that was smart was partnering with hotels to get this equipment into
Mhm.
the hotels because part of getting adoption for a product is just getting access to consumers and getting people to fall in love with it. And so, it sounds like though that's not necessarily going to carry forward and drive the lead gen that they hope. So they also invested in stores. Again, more capital, more
Right.
fixed cost, right? As you get into these long leases. So let's go to, do you think that they can turn it around?
Turn it around, bright eyes. It's interesting. Look, I think the future is in B2B, like these wholesale arrangements with like these massive companies, hotel chains, event and experience spaces, gyms. That has to be part of the future because otherwise you're going consumer by consumer. And again, it's like, what can those people afford? Companies like Allbirds are going into wholesale because it's
Right.
extremely expensive to attract a consumer. And if your price point is over thousands of dollars, you'd much rather have a gym who's already investing in lots of expensive equipment and then advertising it over the life of all the members in the club. And I
Yeah.
think that's a much better model for Peloton. And then if you come into the club, then that's part of your customer acquisition to hooking them on the content that maybe they can take the content at home once they've had that experience.
Yeah, I agree. And I wonder too, they do have great content. I mean, some people look at their Peloton instructors as almost a life coach, right? And so, and these Peloton instructors have become figureheads and heavy influencers in this space because of the notoriety they get through the platform. And that was part of the new CEO Barry,
Mm,
his strategy, right, was to
right.
help monetize this content better. Do you think there's still an opportunity there, or does that start to fall apart?
Yeah. I mean, I think content is a great idea and content is a terrible idea. The problem with content is that content is everywhere. And so
Right.
it's very easy to get cheap content on YouTube, on TikTok. And so any influencer can create amazing fitness content that you don't have to pay for. Other businesses like Masterclass have tried to put together like a subscription business based on content. Like, where's
Yeah.
Masterclass today? I'm like, it's all right, but it's not the future of Peloton.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. So we know that they're restructuring. We know they've just laid off their staff. What is their next act?
I think, look, step one is they need a new CEO. Step two, they need to decide if the business is salvageable or if they're going to go for some kind of like intellectual property licensing firm.
Yeah.
Do they need to make new changes to the business? Clearly, they need to reduce costs further. They just laid off 15% of the workforce. They didn't really give that much indication what the next act is going to be. I do think that B2B wholesale has to be a big part of their next vision. I do think international expansion with these corporate partners needs to be a big part of the next vision. Outside of that, maybe it's just always a niche business, and that's
Some people can build great niche businesses. It just can't cost that much. It's actually interesting. Edward Scott Finnegan posted that there's some Pelotons in Rita's lounge. I don't normally think about working out when I'm hanging in my Sky Club. I'm a
exactly.
Sky Club fan. I have actually had to shower there before. I used to take a ton of red-eye flights, and that's like the most diciest thing. So I don't think you want to be working up a sweat and getting on a plane
No.
alone than having a shower. So I agree with you. That's probably not the next act for them. But hey, you got to give it to them for trying. All right. So I want to talk about a contrast and get your take on this one, Rick. So
Okay.
Anna had their Q1 results, and it was gangbusters. If you hadn't
Okay.
the stock jumped 30% following their earnings release. It's surged an impressive 3,100% since its December 2022 low. And there's just been a lot of excitement about the turnaround that this company has had, which was following a similar trajectory as Peloton, right? A pandemic boom. And I'm going to give you some stats really quick.
Okay.
So, as you know, they started in 2012, went public in 2017. Revenues hitting 859 million the year that they went up on the New York Stock Exchange. And then, 2020 hit another, boom for them, 5.6 billion by the end of 2020. So massive uptick. And they more than doubled in 2021 to 12.6 billion. So everyone was really riding high on Carvana.
Right.
Lots of people investing. And what's interesting is, Peloton had some legal issues. So did Carvana. Carvana actually had some challenges. They were banned from selling cars in actually my hometown, Raleigh, North Carolina, until January of 2022 because they didn't deliver titles to the DMV. All while selling vehicles without passing a state inspection. Some things that you probably want to do as
Small issues.
list in your, they also had some issues in the Midwest where they weren't handing over titles to consumers as well, and were in like some class action lawsuits. So again, so a little bit of details as you're trying to stand up a company. They also had, while their revenue was soaring, the losses in 2021 were growing. They grew to a negative 287 million. By the end of 2021, their market cap was at 20 billion. But if you look at where it fell to 2.1 billion after the crash. So kind of some interesting things. I think that you've seen this resurgence, and a lot of it was same playbook. They had to restructure. They had to, rethink the model. They had to rethink profitability. They've done layoffs as well. They've spent actually less on advertising and tightened up their inventory, which, is the playbook we see most people do when they're right sizing businesses. Curious, if to our audience, do you know about Carvana? Have you heard their story? But also, Rick, what do you think? Has this brand got what it takes to sustain?
Yeah, I mean, look, you're talking about something that's like a little bit of a generational shift in shopping because overall, who's buying cars? Cars have gotten, especially during the pandemic and post-pandemic, cars have gotten a lot more expensive.
Right.
And so I'm sure, first of all, that probably helps Carvana's revenue, but you also have like somewhat of a regulated, controlled industry where there's sort of a multi-tier system between the dealers, and the manufacturers. And so Carvana, where do they fit in this world?
Mhm.
We've seen like other digital operators like Amazon have to like, well, we're gonna partner with Hyundai to sell Hyundais on Amazon. Like, well, not exactly. They're like selling them through the dealers,
Right.
and you still have to walk into a dealer. So I think, look, if this business is the right size, I think you cannot imagine a more horrific buying experience than walking into a car dealer. I mean, anyone who's ever seen the movie Fargo and tried to get a few bucks taken off the True Coat because you didn't order it, but it comes on your car anyway, and then you're cursing at the dealer, understands that car buying is a bad experience. And so anything that can be done at all to improve that experience, to make the pricing more transparent, to make the buying process more transparent, I think it's part of the reason people like Tesla
Yeah.
is because the buying experience
Moving
is just
on.
easier. You can just go online, you can pre-order. It might take you a year to get your car,
Yeah.
but um, it's a better experience.
Yeah, look, and I have to shout out to the dealers everywhere because some of you may know my dad grew up a farmer, is a farmer. He also sold cars on the side. So minus my dad, yes, agree that car dealers can be a little dicey. I do agree with you that too. We have a generation of people that are growing up using everything on their phones. They order everything.
Right.
They DoorDash, their meals, or Uber Eats their meals. They forgot their cable at home. They're going to DoorDash that. And so I think that we have a generation, to your point, that's kind of used to this interaction. And so it feels like also it doesn't have the same lockup as Peloton does, where only a certain portion of the market is going to be able to afford the product, right? Because they have a range of product. And a lot of times it's used inventory, which is a better fit for a variety of different customers anyway. So I think as long as they can keep things going and maybe keep their insider trading in check, because sorry to talk about that, probably should be good.
We're just papering over that, Jess. Good
I
luck.
mean, there's a rug swept under it. We're all good.
No, 100%. Look, I think we're sweeping under that rug. You mentioned about the stock dropping 30% earlier on. And, we were going to talk about Shopify today. And I think we have some field reporting on this. We were going to plan a big segment on this, but actually we were going to wait to cover this segment until the stock stopped dropping. And so here's what we have from the field.
That's great. Oh no.
Oh no. It's an issue.
Yeah. The street
look,
not liking the forward-looking guidance.
Street, no likey guidance. Guys, we're based in New York City. That was a live shot of Wall Street.
Yeah, there's lots of dumpster fires going on, and it's pretty surprising considering that it was not such a bad earnings report, but that's for a later day.
No, they had a good earnings. They had bad guidance, and I think part of the issue is that Shopify has transitioned from a mostly SaaS business to a mostly transactional business.
Right.
As a mostly transactional business, they're much more subject to the whims of GMV and consumer behavior. And so as they go forward, I think one of the things that Wall Street will be interested in understanding is like how do you smooth that out? How do you improve your gross margins? How do you guarantee that revenue going forward? So,
but they did say, right, consumer is still resilient. So that's it was a bit of an interesting take.
Yeah.
Hey, did you know, Rick, that there were 2 Met Galas this year and this week? I don't know if you knew that. Like it's a big deal, and maybe some of our viewers are interested, maybe some of you aren't. But we thought we would talk to you about the Met Gala that most of you didn't see. So I think
2 Met Galas.
Yeah, 2 Met Galas.
I'm excited.
Yes.
No, I think the coup de grace at the end, the elephant on the beach ball.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think what we didn't get to at the end of the video is the elephant falls off the beach ball.
It sure does. Yeah, so, we really wanted to bring you guys that because I think that as we read this Forrester B2C report, we were left scratching our heads. Before we dive into why, Rick, do you wanna kinda talk about what the spirit of this report is supposed to do, why it was created in the first place, and, like, let's help kinda set the scene for, maybe why we had our platforms dressed in the beautiful gardenia walking the red carpet.
Yeah, it's great. So look, there are a set of companies called analyst firms, Forrester, Gartner, IDC, and quite a number of others, especially in various niches. They cover essentially categories of software. And one major category of software is e-commerce platforms. And so Forrester in particular divides that into two categories, um, business to business and business to consumer. And so ostensibly, Forrester really serves two audiences. One is the vendors themselves. They actually advise vendors on their roadmap and what they're doing. And then second, they serve um, brands and retailers to help guide them on their e-commerce roadmaps and journeys. And
Right.
so from a business model point of view, it's fantastic because they're getting money from both sides. From a transparency point of view and a vendor point of view, um, many buyers have questioned openly and quietly, is this a pay to play situation? Is Forrester a retail media network in disguise? And so I think that's the question we have, where it's like we have this report, and the business to consumer report is supposed to tell you about the leaders, and there's no leader in this report. And what does it mean that for a brand, like how is that going to
Right.
help you? Look,
Right.
there's part of it, like everyone focuses on the wave and the quadrant and like whatever it is, but ultimately there's a lot more value in the report too, which is just the criteria that are used
Yeah.
to come up with those metrics. That criteria, even if you don't necessarily agree with the results of the criteria, the fact that there are criteria does help buyers understand what the categories of um, areas are. So
Yeah, so I have so many thoughts on this. I know you do too. And when you talk about the people quietly, I believe you're talking about the people who are writing what the future version of a letter to the editor is. Like you get a lot of pings, you get a lot of, "Hey Rick, what do you really think about this?" So, let's talk about the criteria that it's evaluated on because you've written many times that companies aren't replatforming, and,
yes.
they'd rather your famous quote, they'd rather chop off their arm or gnaw off their arm, CEOs versus replatform. So we get it's like a very arduous task and an arduous process, but the reality is people do have to keep their tech modernized in order to keep up with the modern consumer and keep cost effective and run their businesses more efficiently. So what is the criteria in this report, and how were kind of these companies and platforms evaluated?
Yeah, I mean, there are a few different major criteria that they talked about. One is front end. How does the user interface, can that be put together? Architecture is another one. Third party channels and access to third party channels is another one. So those are some of the big ones. Um, Catalog management is another one. Merchandising is another one.
Yep.
And I think finally, customer success is a report, and support is another one. So,
Oh wait,
kind of
don't
the
forget security and privacy for your
oh, security.
because that's a little bit important.
It's yes,
Let's
security
encrypt our
is
credit card data and customer
secure
order
security
data.
security is super important. And I think look, we can start at the beginning. The most developer, as you might expect, the most developer focused platforms got the highest marks for architecture. That was kind of your commerce tools and your
Mhm,
elastic paths
mhm.
got there. Front end, out of a 5, no one got more than a 3.
Which
And
is
so,
questionable.
like, this question is like, what are you looking for your platform to become like in a world where there's like, I don't know how many content management systems out there, but more than a dozen, and you can build your own front end anyway. Are you really going, especially at the mid-market and enterprise level, is that the number one thing you're buying an e-commerce platform for? I would argue not.
No, I'm going to say no. From a brand perspective, no.
Yeah. And then the other things are like third-party channels and marketplaces. Again, this wasn't really a factor. I'm curious why third-party channels is something you expect in the box of an e-commerce platform. There've been companies like Channel Advisor and Feedonomics and Channel Engine and Rhythm. Sorry, Rhythm, that's a new one. And they have been around forever. And so the idea that you're going to choose one thing for all those functions and help you sell on Amazon at the same time is a little bit unrealistic.
And that's, I think, where we are from an enterprise perspective as well, right? Which we all know lots of these platforms are going after enterprise in this B2C space. You can't expect your platform to do all in one, because if you do, it's going to do all in one pretty shittily. Let's just
let's be honest.
It is today. I mean, no one platform can do all of those things. And so I think that's also, as a brand, as you're looking at this report and you're trying to figure out if it's helpful for you, you have your own set of criteria, right? Rick, you've done platform evaluations before and helped companies structure their RFPs. You have to have your own weighting criteria based on ultimately what you're hoping to solve for. And I think that's where I was curious, as a brand, is this really helping understand and unpack? Even if I was using this as a conduit to help build an RFP or assess decisions, is this really going to help me think about it from a criteria perspective?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good question. I'd almost throw the question back to you, being at a retailer, having evaluated platforms before. If you look at this report, like, what do you get out of it?
I don't. I'm going to be really, really honest. Especially as I looked at the synopsis, there is nothing in there that was, that's a new nugget of information. I could get that just by doing my own Google research, which we know most B2C buyers and brands and retailers do right now today. I think that's what's part of this. Like if you're in sales in one of those companies, your buyer is so informed by the time they get to you and feel like they already know a lot of information. So they just want to cut to the chase of the stuff they don't know. And I think that's the hope of why you have these types of reports, is that you're going to find some new nugget of information. And I think really what this would do is help accelerate maybe your criteria development and make sure you've checked all the boxes of the things you want to evaluate, and help force the conversations internally of what your own weighting and stack rank is. Because the weighting itself is peanut butter spread. Lots of things just got like 5%, 6%, 4%. I think there was one that was like 30%. I forget what that was. But, it was like very spread across. So I didn't see something in there that stood out to me of like, oh, wow, I'm so glad I have this. And I'm curious if the audience did, for those that read it.
Yeah, definitely. If you have your comments about the report, there've been comments all over the LinkedIniverse and the Twitterverse and all the verses out there about it. There's two sides of the same coin. Number one is very few people are replatforming, except if there's sort of like a corporate event, an end of life, new financing, new executives. Outside of that, that's kind of an issue.
Yeah.
The second thing is everyone has to evolve all the time. And so is this the vehicle that's helping us to do so? If you think about a project as difficult as a replatform, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. And if you kind of agree with the point that commerce is essentially a commodity, the platform itself, it's like when's the last time you heard like one of the major platforms like going down for an extended period of time, or like not working at all?
No.
To do a major transition to a platform, to be honest, with what I find that happens more than anything else is like you have the wrong requirements, like you don't know what your goals are. And then second, you choose the wrong agency partner who then sort of like drives you off the cliff.
Yeah. Yep. Agree. Well, and I was wondering, do you want to unpack a couple of the other head scratchers that we had? So you talked about the front end, that no one got a 5, or even higher than a 3. The other one that was interesting, I talked about security, and look, we have had so many issues with people trying to hack websites, especially at the enterprise level, right? Like those are where the hackers go, because it's where the money is, and it's
Right.
where they can make the most disruption. How in this land of cybersecurity can anyone who scores a 1 on security make the list? And we actually had that. Like, is
Yeah,
it a contender?
there shouldn't be in the list. It's a little bit, it almost feels like there should be some minimum criteria,
Right.
because otherwise,
The list.
what are you evaluating here? If you
Yeah.
have an insecure platform, it shouldn't be a leader, it shouldn't be a challenger, it shouldn't be a contender.
It shouldn't even be in a wave, right? It's probably like buried at the bottom of the sea.
Right, exactly.
Bad analogy.
So, yeah, it's being crashed over by the
It's
waves.
being crashed over. It's a sunk ship,
Yeah,
maybe. All right.
beach
So
metaphor for you.
I know, I'm working on it today. Also, Shopify had a 1 on catalog management, but a 5 on merchandising. How is that possible in your mind?
It's a it shouldn't in theory be possible, because if you have merchandise a bad catalog, then doesn't your merchandising also suffer? So I don't know. At least be consistent on that point. I would say, um, and I guess the question is there a way for Shopify's catalog to be more flexible, or to incorporate new business models? And I can see where that historically has been lacking, and especially I think compared to some of the longer standing enterprise vendor, there is less flexibility. But then to have a 5 on merchandising, like, what is it in Shopify's platform that allows a level 5 merchandising? I can't think of what that feature is.
Yeah, I
Unless
know.
it's like part of their app store, which again, most of those vendors can apply to any platform anyway.
Correct, correct. So, do you think that there's a better alternative for this information if the spirit is, to help the brands and retailers more fairly assess these platforms and compare? What do you think? Is there something better?
Yeah, it's a good question. Michael Jones, who's a big friend of the program, he says, like, these used to be useful a long time ago. Now it's more like a CYA. And so, like, hey, we're choosing this vendor on the report. And as a result, Mr. Board Member, Mrs. Board Member, you should feel good about our decision. And I think, look, it's kind of the motto that no one ever got fired for choosing IBM. Ironically, Harley said on the last earnings call this past week that, he thinks in the future enterprises will say no one get fired of choosing Shopify. Well, the dumpster
Bold
fire
statement.
earlier in this call might disagree with Mr. Finkelstein on this remark.
Bold statement. Maybe he needs to turn the hat around. I don't know, but yes, I think that it is interesting. And what another point that came out was Forrester's perspective that, hey, this isn't really for evaluation and replatforming. This is just to make sure you're safe and like to help your retention strategy. What's your take on that?
A retention strategy for who? Like, look, if this report is for the vendors and how to tell them to retain their customers, then you should just publish it to the company. Like, it's like internal research. And so the idea that this is a vendor retention tool is nonsense. It's
Yeah, because
utter
like,
nonsense.
yeah, look, I've been in B2B sales. Yes, it's been a quiet minute since that happened, but I would never say, hey guys, we're in the contenders. Forrester says we're all right. So that's why you should stay with us. Like, I better be talking about what features we're bringing, what value we're bringing, how we're helping you achieve your business goals. I better not be like giving you this so you can tuck it under your pillow at night.
Yeah, exactly. And it's kind of, look, I mean, funny, we were talking about the UI and Shopify and the Met Gala.
Mhm.
My favorite. Who's your favorite Met Gala character that we
Oh,
reviewed earlier?
man, there's so many. I do think it has to be Shopify because they really portrayed this gardenia element and took it to the next level, incorporated with the greens of their logo. Which
Yeah.
really shined on the red carpet. Felt good.
Yeah, I think the big issue with the portrayal of Shopify was the hat wasn't backwards. Like
Oh,
that,
yeah.
like they should have turned it around, because that seems to be the most common portrayal of Shopify on CNBC.
Yes, it is. And with ticker slash believe the hype.
I love it. I love
Yeah.
it.
All right. Are we done on this one or any final words?
Yeah, I mean, look, the final words are, if you're going on a replatform journey, it's not easy. First of all, you're one of the few in the world there because again, most people aren't replatforming.
Also, I
Second, if
just commend you and applaud you.
yes, if you're trying to replatform, God bless you and Godspeed. So, second, if you're a vendor platform, don't use this as a retention tool because it's
No.
not going to help you.
It will not help
Um,
you. And sorry, if you're doing this as a salesperson, I'm just going to say it, you're lazy. So I'm just going to go out and be bold and spicy on a Friday. But yes,
exactly. So
this is this
that'll
is
be our final word on this.
there we go. All right. So are we ready to bring our favorite resident field reporter, Nick Kaplan, in for the Kaplan's Corner?
We are. So let's welcome it on.
Hey, Nick. Oh, you're on mute.
Bold and spicy every day, Kaplan.
That's right. That's right. You're on the soapbox. So what have you got for us?
I mean, I am on the soapbox and I'm evangelical every day, but today with some pressure because I think one of my kids is home from school and could in fact be watching this. Your person, Rick, is rational. So poor Shopify. Their forward-looking guidance wasn't so well received by the street. So I want to talk today about, on the heels of Google and Shopify, a tale of two very different companies and their earnings, what the world of the public markets looks like. In a world of meme stocks and TikTok news and all kinds of marketing, we have often talking about on this show private equity. What we don't often think about is public equity. We just think about the market and stocks. And so, I think that when you think about private equity, it's a pretty simple equation, right? Company comes in and values a business, makes an investment, raises some debt, puts it on the company, and all the horror stories that we all have lived, the people often don't understand about the delta between what the company investors want and what the company thinks it can do and how they bridge that gap. In the public markets, very different story. A lot of people don't know that these public companies put out a 10Q, and in it comes an income statement and a balance sheet and a cash flow and disclosures like what we were talking about earlier in the show, a little bit of insider trading, perhaps litigation. And then there's all kinds of management dialogue, really like stories, because that press release comes out and in it is their EPS, which there are all kinds of EPS calculations, but earnings per share comes. And then what happens is the public markets vote investors, whether it's individual investors or funds. And there's a whole industry of people around these businesses. There's investors, there's investment bankers, there's investor relations, analysts, compliance, and there's the SEC. It's crazy. But what ends up happening is decisions get made and rational or irrational behavior ensues. And so for our friends at Shopify, and I will say, I am really, really long on Shopify. I think it is a wonderful platform that solves problems and got a bad rap in its earnings. And listen, they did significantly miss their income. And so with revenue up 23% quarter over quarter prior year, losses did exceed what the market expected and the shares are down. And, I'm not wearing a vest today because I'm still feeling the heat in this New York City office of that dumpster fire. But on the other hand, we had Google, who really performed really well and has performed well for quite some time and crushed it. And their stock immediately was up 20%. And I guess for me, what I'm talking about today is the pressure that these companies feel to respond and react really to what happens in these earnings calls and how the markets drive them. The Shopify strategy remains the same. The opportunity remains. It is solving a massive problem for the industry, which is commerce simplified, expanding into the enterprise space, evolving as it goes. And because they had a bad quarter, doesn't change that. And Google, amazing alphabet, but still has the same litany of issues facing it, which is, can they continue as the walled gardens come with the deprecation of the cookie in the third quarter of this year, be viable by driving their ad revenue as they continue to diversify into other channels? Challenges remain at Google, yet the stock went nuts. Opportunity remains at Shopify. The opportunity remains to be big, yet the stock crashed. So today, I'll think along the lines of, the Charlie Munger Buffett, focus on the fundamentals. Because of good earnings calls, companies drive decisions and strategy and act irrationally. We as the potential investors and observers of these people need to continue to act rationally.
Rational
That's
actors. That is
by a rational person.
It's a hard ask.
There's some big
But
shoes.
tell me, right? Like, you guys are two of the smarter people I know. Like, Google's got to sell more ads. People are thinking about ways to diversify their acquisition. Shopify, the day before its earnings, is it rocketed. It's still a wonderful company. Nothing changed.
Agreed. Well, thank you, Nick, as always, bringing that words of wisdom, and we'll keep you on your soapbox because you got a lot of good stuff to say. So thank you so much. Super insightful. You're staying for our dance party, right? We got.
I love that song. So
it's so good.
Yeah,
so good.
Definitely.
All right, you guys, are we ready to wrap it, Rick?
I think we're ready to wrap it up. And from our outsider trader.
Have a great weekend, everybody.